I told my entitled parents to move out in 24 hours. They thought I was blurring. I am currently sitting in my living room surrounded by silence. It is the kind of heavy, pressurized silence that comes after a bomb goes off. But for the first time in 4 months, the air doesn't smell like my father's cheap cigars or my mother's overpowering floral perfume. It smells like bleach and victory. I work as a structural engineer. I'd like things to make sense. Load-bearing walls, foundations, tensile strength. These are things I understand. People, specifically the two people who raised me, are variables I never calculated for. I bought my house 3 years ago. It is a modest 3-bedroom place, but it is mine. I paid for every brick. My parents, on the other hand, have always been big-picture people. That is code for financial disasters who believe they are temporarily embarrassed millionaires. The nightmare started exactly 4 months ago. My mother called me hysterical. She said a massive pipe had burst in their upstairs bathroom, destroying the floor and leaking into the kitchen. She claimed the house was unlivable and they needed to shut off the water for major remediation. They asked for a place to stay for 2 weeks tops. I hesitated. I knew them. But they are my parents. I said yes. They arrived with 4 massive suitcases and a U-Haul trailer. That should have been the first red flag. You don't bring a trailer for a 2-week stay while your house is being dried out. When I asked about it, my father waved me off, saying it was better to be safe than sorry because they didn't want the construction crew stealing their valuables. I swallowed my doubt and let them in. The first week was tolerable. The second week, the contractors at their place were supposedly delayed. By the third week, they had fully colonized my house. My father took over the living room. He is a man who believes he is the king of whatever square footage he occupies. He changed the Wi-Fi password because the old one was too hard to remember and didn't tell me. He ate the meal prep I made for work, leaving the dirty Tupperware shoved under the couch. My mother was more insidious. She reorganized my kitchen. Not cleaned, reorganized. She hid my protein powder because she said it looked like drugs, and she started intercepting my mail. She told me she was just being helpful because I always miss things, but I later realized she was curating what I saw. The conflict escalated in month 2. I came home from a 10-hour shift to find my home office, the one room I explicitly told them was off limits because I handle sensitive blueprints, had been turned into a sewing room. My monitors were unplugged and stacked in the hallway. My ergonomic chair was replaced with a folding table covered in fabric scraps. I'd lost it. I asked them what they were doing, trying to keep my voice level. My father didn't even look up from my TV. He told me my mother needed a hobby because she was stressed about their house repairs and told me not to be selfish. I reminded them I pay the mortgage with the work I do in that room. My mother chimed in, holding a spool of thread like a weapon, asking who paid for my diapers. She said they were guests and I should be making them comfortable, not interrogating them. I moved my stuff back in that night. The next day, they gave me the silent treatment. They ate the steak I had bought for a special dinner and left the gristle on the counter. But the real turning point, the moment the ground fell out from under me, happened last Tuesday. I came home early. My father's truck was gone. My mother was napping in the guest room. I saw a thick envelope on the kitchen counter. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to them, but it had my address as the current residence. It was from a title company. I know I shouldn't have opened it. Legally, that is a gray area. Morally, I didn't care. I slid a knife under the flap. It was a closing statement. They hadn't just had a pipe burst. They had sold their house. They sold it 4 months ago, 3 days before they called me with the emergency. I stood there reading the numbers. They had walked away with nearly $200,000 in equity. They weren't waiting for repairs. They were homeless by choice, sitting on a pile of cash and living in my house for free while I paid for their groceries, their electricity, and their water. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It wasn't the heat of anger, it was the absolute zero of betrayal. I waited for my father to get home. He walked in around 6 p.m., carrying a 6-pack of beer he definitely didn't buy with his own money. I was sitting at the dining table, the document laid out in front of me. I told him we needed to talk. He glanced at the paper, and for a split second, I saw fear. Then the entitlement kicked in.
He scoffed, popping a beer, and told me I shouldn't go through other people's mail because it's a felony. I ignored the threat. I told him I knew they sold their house 4 months ago. I asked about the plumbing repairs. My mother walked into the room, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She saw the document and stiffened. She told me they'd downsized. She said they did it for me to be closer. I told them they lied. I told them they had been living here for free, eating my food, driving up my bills, while they had 200 grand in the bank. I called them moochers. My father slammed his beer down. He told me to watch my tone. He gave me the classic speech about how they raised me and sacrificed everything for me. He said I wouldn't have this house if they hadn't taught me the value of hard work. I stood up and told him they taught me nothing. I worked my way to college. I bought this place. They didn't put a dime into it. And then I told them they were leaving. My father laughed. It was a dark, ugly sound. He told me they weren't going anywhere. He said they'd looked it up. They had been there for more than 30 days. He said they have tenant rights and I couldn't kick them out without an eviction process. He said it would take months, maybe a year if they fought it. My mother crossed her arms, a smug look on her face. She agreed with him. She said if I tried to change the locks, they would call the police for illegal eviction. They had planned this. That is what hit me hardest. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew the law better than I did. They had sold their home, banked the cash, and trapped me in my own property. I told them they had 24 hours. My father sneered and told me to go to my room. I didn't say another word. I grabbed my keys and walked out. I didn't go to a bar. I went to my office. I spent the night sleeping under my desk, fueled by coffee and spite. I pulled my credit report. I needed to see how deep the rot went. If they were willing to lie about the house, what else were they lying about? The credit report took a minute to load. When it did, I saw it. 3 credit cards opened in the last 2 months. Total balance, $45,000. And a home equity line of credit inquiry on my house. They had used my social security number. They stole my identity. The inquiry had been rejected because I have a credit freeze, thank God for past paranoia. But the credit cards, they had gone through. They must have intercepted the mail. This wasn't just a landlord-tenant dispute anymore. This was a felony. I called a lawyer friend of mine at 7 a.m. I explained everything, the residency, the sale of their home, the identity theft. He told me if I went the eviction route, they were right.
We're right, it takes months. But if they committed domestic fraud and identity theft, and I felt unsafe, I could get a protective order. That is immediate. And the fraud gave me leverage for a constructive removal by the police if I pressed charges. He asked if I could get them out today. I asked if filing the police report for identity theft and showing the officers the unauthorized cards was enough. He said yes, I could have them removed for criminal activity. I left work. I went to the police station. I filed the report. I showed them the credit inquiries, the dates, and the fact that the cards were mailed to my address but intercepted. I had a paper trail. The detective took it seriously. Identity theft against a family member is still theft. I drove back to the house at 4 p.m. I had 2 officers with me. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a contractor's van. My stomach dropped. I ran inside, the officers trailing behind me. My father was standing in the living room with a guy in overalls. My father was pointing at the wall that separated the kitchen from the living room, a load-bearing wall. He was telling the guy to knock the whole thing down to open up the space, claiming I was paying for it. I roared at them to get out. The contractor jumped. My father spun around, his face turning red. He started yelling at me not to interrupt him when he was conducting business. Then he saw the uniforms. My mother came running in from the kitchen asking what was going on. She saw the cops and asked if I'd called them on my own parents. I turned to the officers. My voice was shaking with adrenaline. I told them these 2 people were trespassing. I told them they had also committed identity theft and credit card fraud in my name. I handed the paperwork to the older officer with the case number I'd just filed. The officer looked at it, then looked at my father. He asked if my father authorized a contractor to work on a home he did not own. My father shouted that it was their house. He said they lived there and had rights. He called me a liar and said I was unstable. Then my mother did something I will never forget. She threw herself onto the floor. She literally threw herself down, knocked over a lamp, and started screaming. She screamed that I hit her.
She screamed that I pushed her. She yelled for the officer to help her, claiming elder abuse. My father joined in immediately. He yelled that he saw it and that I attacked her. The contractor looked like he wanted to dissolve into the drywall. The officers' hands went to their belts. For a second, I thought I was going to jail. It was 2 against 1, their word against mine. The officer commanded me to step back. I raised my hands and said I didn't touch her. My mother screamed, liar, clutching her hip, claiming I had been abusive for months. I took a deep breath. I told the officer to look at the bookcase, top shelf, behind the plant. The officer frowned and asked what I was talking about. I pointed to the blinking red light of the Wisecam I had installed 3 weeks ago after I suspected they were going through my room. I told them I had video and audio recording of the entire room. I told them it uploads to the cloud instantly and they could watch her throw herself on the ground on my phone right now. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother stopped screaming. She looked at the camera, then at me. The performance died instantly. I pulled out my phone, opened the app, and played the clip for the officer. It showed me walking in, the argument, and then my mother looking at my father, nodding, and diving onto the floor like a soccer player faking an injury. The officer's face went hard. He looked at my mother, who was now scrambling to stand up, miraculously healed. He told her to get up. His voice dropped all politeness. He informed her that filing a false police report is a crime. Attempting to frame someone for assault is a crime. And coupled with the identity theft report, she was in serious trouble. He turned to my father and told him to turn around and place his hands behind his back. My father sputtered as the cuffs clicked. He yelled that he had rights and he was my father. The officer told him he was under arrest for fraud and filing a false report. My mother started wailing for real this time. She asked where she was supposed to go. The officer told her she had 20 minutes to pack her personal belongings and vacate the premises, or she could join him. She shrieked that they were tenants. The officer shut her down immediately. He told her she just tried to frame the homeowner for assault on video. He said her tenancy argument was a civil matter for a judge, but right now she was the subject of a criminal investigation and a danger to the homeowner. She was leaving now. The next 20 minutes were a blur of chaotic movement. My mother shoved clothes into trash bags, screaming curses at me the entire time. She called me ungrateful. She called me a snake. She said I was dead to her. I stood in the doorway and told her I knew. I told her I was dead to her the moment she decided to steal from me. My father was placed in the back of the squad car. He glared at me through the window. He didn't look sorry. He looked furious that his property, me, had malfunctioned. When my mother dragged her last bag out to her car, the Lexus she bought with the equity money, she turned to me one last time. She told me I would rot alone. She said I had no family. I looked at her. I looked at the empty driveway where the contractor had fled. I looked at my house, standing solid and quiet. I told her I'd rather rot alone than be eaten alive by her. I watched her drive away. Then I went inside and locked the door. The aftermath has been a legal whirlwind. My father was charged with identity theft and filing a false police report. Because of his age and lack of prior history, his lawyer is pushing for a plea deal that involves probation and massive restitution. He's currently out on bail, staying at a Motel 6. My mother is with him. They're burning through their house sale money on legal fees and hotel rooms. They tried to sue me for illegal eviction, but the judge threw it out immediately once the video of the faked assault was entered into evidence. It turns out judges don't look kindly on people who try to send their children to prison with fake accusations. I froze my credit again. I disputed the charges. The credit card companies, upon seeing the police report and the arrest record, wiped the debt. I'm currently in the process of putting a lien on their remaining assets to recover the cost of the damages they did to the house and the utilities they racked up. I changed the locks. I installed a security system that rivals Fort Knox. People ask me if I feel guilty. They say I went too far. They say, they're your parents. Couldn't you have just given them more time? No. Entitlement is a parasite. It doesn't stop feeding until the host is dead. They didn't want a place to stay. They wanted my life. They wanted my financial stability to fund their retirement, and they were willing to send me to jail to keep it. Last night, I walked into the guest room. It still faintly smells of her perfume. I started ripping up the carpet. I'm turning it back into an office, but this time I'm putting a lock on the door. I sat down in the middle of the bare floor and drank a beer. It was quiet. It was lonely, but it was my quiet. And honestly, it was the most peaceful drink I've ever had. I learned that family isn't about
blood. Blood just makes the betrayal hurt more. Family is about respect. And if you have to choose between your parents and your self-respect, choose the one that lets you sleep at night. If you want to see the security footage of my mother winning an Oscar for Best Flop, or hear updates on how my dad likes the motel life, hit that subscribe button. I promise my content is more genuine than my parents' love.